Hello everyone. Welcome to our Lean Development and its Impact on Software Testing webinar series. Today's this series conclusion. My name is Christine and I'll be your moderator. Today's webinar will be led by LogicGear's co-founder Michael Hackett. Before we begin, let me cover a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar will last about 45 minutes. We will not have a Q&A. Instead, please DM any questions you have and we'll follow up with them after the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and distributed within 48 hours. Now, let me introduce Michael and LogicGear. About LogicGear. LogicGear is a leading provider of enterprise software testing solutions and test automation tools. Michael Hackett is a co-founder of LogicGear. In addition to software engineering work, Michael's provided training for Salesforce, Fidelity, Intuit, Adobe, Bank of America, and many other software producers. His training courses have brought Silicon Valley testing expertise to over 16 countries. As a member of IEEE, Michael spoke at the IEEE Conference on Global Software Engineering in 2009 and 2011. Michael has 2 decades of experience with software engineering, quality assurance, and testing of various applications. Michael is a certified Scrum Master and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering from Carnegie Mellon University. In Part 2, Michael will discuss the remaining 3 lean principles and analyze each principle's effect on testing and testing team culture. Then, he'll conclude with the recommended first steps for organizations to take when looking to implement lean within their organization. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Michael. Take it away, Michael.
These last couple of lean principles, I like to talk about them together because I think they fit together, and it's where lean gets tough to me. Amplify learning, empower the team, and see the whole. So let's use that design decision making I used earlier, where we're not going to write a design doc anymore, and we're going to do just-in-time design. So who's the best team to design this function that I have in front of me? The team that's going to do this function, right? The team that knows this function, they're going to be writing the code. They know how to design it best because they're going to get into the low-level details. They have to be really aware of what's going on there. So I'm going to empower the team and let the team decide. Well, if I'm going to let the team decide, if I'm going to empower the team to decide, they better be able to see the whole picture. They better not do something in the design of this feature that's going to break something else. They better not design this function that it's not going to run in a workflow where there's a function 1, function 2, then they get to my function 3, then my function 3 has to work with function 4. Right? They have to be able to see the whole workflow. They have to be able to see the whole picture. What's the value proposition we're making to customers, and how am I going to design my feature to deliver value to the customers? To do that, how much do your developers and testers, how much do they know the user, know the customers? If we're going to empower the team to be making these decisions, we have to amplify learning. We have to amplify learning a lot. We have to amplify learning in the sense that they have to know the customers and the users. They have to know the whole picture of how the whole product is going to work and what the value proposition is to deliver to the customers. They have to know about the platform. They have to know if we're going to be working with double by characters, how it's going to work in these various browsers that are primarily used for double by characters. And if it's going to go to these other character sets, what are issues with that? And if it's going to work on iPads versus iPhones, what's the layout going to look like? Amplify learning is a big deal. If I'm going to empower the team to be making, in this example, design decisions, they better know what they're doing. They better be able to see the whole picture. And more than know what they're doing, they better be pretty knowledgeable, more than just a basic level of knowledge. They need to really fully grasp what we're trying to do here if I'm going to empower them with this decision making. So hopefully by this you can see how these pieces fit together. Empower the team sounds great. Let the team decide. You want to write test plans? Empower the team. You want to automate something and not automate something else? Empower the team. You want to test something at the UI level, or you think you can just test it at the unit level? Empower the team to decide. That all sounds great. It's great, and I like to do that. I like to empower the team. Right? That's part of managing technology workers today is let the team decide, empower the team, and me as a manager, my job is supporting the team, right? My job is giving them the whole picture, giving them either the whole vision or the whole value proposition, and to give them every opportunity to amplify learning about customers, users, platforms, other skill sets. So I'm very big on empowering the team. It's a great idea when it's implemented well, right? Most teams work on complex, really integrated products where I could have 7 or 8 Scrum teams working together on one product, and all 8 of those Scrum teams are working on one workflow, and they may not see each other very much. They may not be around each other. They may not be in the same office. For this opportunity for better communication and collaboration, where does that happen? Does that happen, at the PO level? Does it happen? Scrum prescribes a ceremony of having a release planning meeting where everybody's going to find out what's going to happen in the release and hear about all that delivering value. But do companies have release planning meetings that are substantial enough where the user stories are understood well enough at the beginning of a release where somebody can lay out, this is what's going to happen in this release, and this is going to be the value that we're going to deliver for pieces on a product that might not be developed for another 3 months. So without getting too lost in that example, empowering the team is great. It's also complicated. And this idea, for example, of whether you test something at the UI level or at the unit level, empower the team to decide. There are a lot of organizations who have unit test coverage metrics where a certain percentage of the code has to be tested at the unit level, or you need a certain percentage of coverage, right? IEEE, I mentioned earlier with the test plan standards, IEEE has standards for unit testing coverage that you have 100% statement coverage and 100% branch coverage. Nobody does that. But some companies have, you have to get 60% code coverage or 90% code coverage. If you're writing all new code and don't have a lot of old legacy stuff, there could be metrics that you need 80% code coverage at the unit level. That's an organizational standard that we're not going to empower the team to decide that. That's going to be across teams, and we're not going to empower the teams to do that. So, point is, empowering the team sounds great, but every product that I work on is not one Scrum team releasing a product. The clients that I have today, the projects that I see, the projects that I work on are almost always multiple Scrum teams working on one release and trying to empower the team while keeping people to be able to see the whole picture and learning about what other teams are doing. Okay, we've talked about that piece enough. Further into amplified learning. Lean is about learning, right? Learning about the product, about its uses. Evolving features is lean, right? It's about changes. As you do, let's say you do an MVP, you give it out to your customers, and your customers say, "Yeah, this would be really good if we had this," or "That thing you did, it doesn't really solve what I did. It would be a whole lot better if you did this." Right? If we're saying we want immediate feedback, well, that's learning, right? We get feedback, we get information. Now we have to go change. Now we have to go evolve the product. Learning is finding bugs. This is a great discussion, eye-opening topic to talk about. Learning is finding bugs. I've had people's eyes pop out when I say that. But learning about the system, right? We have this function. What if I try this? What if I do that? What if I change the data here? What if I change the data there? All those testing things we do. We're learning about how the system works. Well, finding bugs is learning about the system. Well, when I do this, it doesn't work. When I do this, the performance grinds down to nothing. When I do this, that works, but then the next step doesn't work. You know what bugs are like, right? So amplifying learning is finding more bugs. Finding more bugs before the customers do. So finding bugs is a very good thing. Learning about the system is a very good thing. Any idea that lean is about cutting testing is the opposite of true, right? Lean is about find more bugs, learn more, amplify learning, find out as much as you can about how the system works. All right. just in exploratory testing and just-in-time design, all these great things, learning how the system works. Learning is developing use cases, developing test cases. Learning is understanding the customers and the users. And I probably said customers and users a handful of times just in the past 10 minutes, because I do find that a lot of developers and a lot of testers are a bit removed from their customers, and they don't. To talk about delivering customer value when you don't know the customers is a roadblock, right? But being able to do it fast, doing continuous delivery and getting something out, doing an MVP to get out to your customers fast to get immediate feedback when you don't know who your customers are is a roadblock. So learning is understanding your customers, understanding your users. That information is first and foremost, at least in Scrum, is going to come from the PO, right? The PO is the channel to your users and customers, but however you can get information. I'm a big advocate of finding out about your customers and your users from support. They hear about problems before anybody else does, right? And every support call is a real user with a real usage that they have a problem with. Even if there's a workaround or they just didn't understand something, support is direct face-to-face with customers and users. You don't only have to find out about your customers from your POs. You can find out about your customers directly from your customers or users, or talk to support. So the lean principle: amplify learning and empower the team. We talked about empower the team enough already. What you documented, what you measure. We're going to talk about measurement in a couple of minutes and how you distribute tasks. So empower the team to make decisions. So what is lean? Lean is you design a simple manufacturing system, like a simple software development process, a simple team agreements, right? But there's always room for improvement. You're continuously learning, continuously improving, continuously tweaking, continuously honing the best practices. Fail fast, get the best process going, and be careful about what you measure. Don't overmeasure. Overmeasuring is overhead, right? So design a simple system to make your product. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of what lean is about, and I want to keep applying this to some different quality and testing ideas, and talk about how to take some first steps. And do a summary before we finish. So these quotes come from the Poppendicks from their website. I have a link to their website, who wrote the Lean Software Development book. The best way to establish reliable, predictable deliveries is to establish reliable, repeatable workflows, including testing being part of a definition of done, and zero technical debt. I didn't go into technical debt as much in this seminar, but technical debt is really like carrying things that we know are defects along, because, well, we'll just fix it later, or we'll deal with it later, or we'll just carry along that technical debt. Is the opposite of lean. Lean is the opposite of technical debt. It's rework, it's redundancy, it's fixing an error that would have been a whole lot cheaper, or completing a task that would have been a whole lot cheaper in the long term to fix when it happened, or when you discovered it, or when you realized that you had more work to do on this task, than just carrying it along and having to go back and redo, refactor, rebuild, whatever it is you're going to do to deal with this technical debt later on, is the opposite of lean. So establish a reliable, predictable practice, workflows to get things done. Keep getting better. There's no such thing as a best practice. Boy, do I have arguments with people about this. People will ask me time, but what's the best practice for agile testing, or what's the best practice for this, or what's the best practice for that? And I say there are no best practices. We learn, right? We do things and we learn and we get better. And people go, well, I want to know standards. I want to know what are the best testing standard practices. Practices evolve. Skills grow. Everything is context driven. So there's no such thing as a best practice, right? We're continuously learning. We're continuously getting better. And the more we learn, the more we can change, right? The more we learn, the more we can optimize. The better we get at certain skills, the more we can optimize and hone, and we I brought up this idea of failing fast earlier, even with the practice, not only a function. I want to innovate some piece of code, so I want to rewrite some function more economically, and I write it and it doesn't work. Fail fast, go back and try and write it another way. Go back and try and write it another way. Fail fast. We get the idea of fail fast when it comes to code. But I could try a practice. I could say, let's stop having daily stand-up meetings. Our daily stand-up meetings stopped working. They're not that effective anymore. Let's just stop having them. Well, stop having them. See how that goes. If it fails, you better fail fast. You don't want to let miscommunication happen and a lack of collaboration because teams aren't having daily stand-ups when so okay, maybe it is a good idea to stop having them, but pay attention. Measure what are we losing by not having a daily stand-up meeting, and then maybe re-implementing them with a better practice or fail fast. Not only with code, but fail fast with practices also. So there's no such thing as a best practice. Practices evolve. We're constantly looking, continuous process improvement. We're constantly trying to make things better and fine tune. You know that from velocity, right? Your velocity should be going up, right? You should be higher and higher velocity with the same team. Because we get better over time. So cut the idea of having one cookie cutter best practice that's going to be good for everybody. Keep getting better, and don't tolerate defects. I talked about this with the technical debt thing. Don't carry along defects. When you find a bug, fix it. Review your automation strategy. I hope you've gotten that out of this session we did today. Your automation strategy should include every level. It should include automation at the unit level, at the service level, at the UI level, whatever level you're looking at. Re-examine your automation strategy. And you want to have an automation strategy that can deliver results as fast as possible. And never mind the example I used of a week-long regression, but even an overnight regression may not be fast enough anymore if your team is building, 2 times a day or 3 times a day. And having automation that will show consistency and make it easy to analyze, right? There's this idea that some people have that running your full regression means running every test, which some teams may need that, or that you run the full regression to make sure that nothing broke. Well, if that's a lot of tests and that testing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and your process you want to do CD, and your CD won't handle you running 100,000 tests on a variety of browsers, devices, environments, all those things you have to do, you're going to have to examine your automation. I've said that already. And I say automate as much as makes sense. Automate as much as makes sense. I think the drive to automate really worked in certain organizations, as well as the drive to automate didn't work in certain organizations. There's still software development teams that have very little automation. They have their own issues to deal with. But for teams that have been automating successfully for 10 years, for 15 years, for 20 years, automating everything doesn't really work anymore because your automation is just going to get bigger and heavier and bigger and heavier and bigger and heavier. You might have a lot of waste. You might have redundancy. Managing your automation. Some people now talk about going back and grooming their automation, that after release they groom their automation. They get rid of a bunch of the automation that may have seemed important at the time in this project, but for the long term, do we want to continue maintaining all of those automated tests? Maybe not. So build a smarter, leaner automation strategy. With lean and DevOps, right? You want to deliver as fast as possible. We know that. Small releases with focused testing. You're not going to switch to small releases and still do giant sets of testing tasks like you used to. If you're doing small releases, figure out what you do to test. Focus your testing. And testing to show consistency, testing to show that if we roll out this feature, this is consistent with the last version that we have. Different than testing for the purpose of nothing broke, testing for the purpose of finding bugs. This idea, we could do a whole topic on testing to show consistency. and the mindset around testing to show consistency when you have such fast releases. When you're doing continuous delivery, maybe continuous deployment, where we're doing daily rollouts to production and doing continuous deployment, your automation strategy is going to change. Automate as much as reasonable. Over automation is overhead. This idea of automate everything is really a thing of the past. Over automation is overhead. So you get these principles, right? It's great to me. This will have been a success if you can at any point name all 7 of these principles, right? Eliminate waste, amplify learning, just-in-time decisions, deliver as fast as possible, empower the team, quality at every step, and see the whole. So I want to read you this great quote. This guy, Aaron Hodder, wrote an article on lean testing in Medium that I have a link here. You can go and read. I think the whole article is worth reading. But what is a tester's job? What does a test engineer do now in modern development? If you think that you're just validating acceptance criteria and writing automation about acceptance criteria, you're really missing the boat, right? Let me read this quote. He has this idea that the product is a solution. If the problem isn't solved, the product doesn't work, right? So the product that you're making is a solution to your customers. This, to me, is all about really understanding the purpose of what you're testing and about seeing the whole picture, seeing the whole system. Software systems as a whole are greater than the sum of their parts. Every individual written requirement or acceptance criteria or user story may be met. Every user story may be passed, and a set of automated checks pass, but taken as a whole, the software may completely fail to achieve what it was designed for, the customer value that was supposed to be delivered, even though all the acceptance criteria pass, or do it in a less than ideal way. Right? Other emergent defects can occur when the software system is taken as a whole. Right? Individual functions may work individually, but when you take the whole system as a whole, other defects can happen. There's workflow inefficiencies that often only become apparent when the entire system is viewed as a whole. I think having this kind of mindset and this kind of conversation with your team is great to think about what is it you're actually testing. That validating acceptance criteria can be done at the unit level by developers or as low a level as possible. But that's not really testing. That's not really figuring out workflows and are we delivering value and end-to-end tasks that can have their own variety of errors, totally different than individual function errors. The tester's job, I think, has changed from what it was early in the Agile and Scrum world, where it became so focused on these user stories and acceptance criteria, to be bigger and more about workflows and delivering value and solving a need and solving a problem that the customer has. So lean in software development. First, look for waste. Independent of just the testing thing that I've been focusing on, look for waste is what we spent the whole first part of this conversation looking at. Lean is about cutting waste. The first place to look for cutting waste, all these things I brought up about automation, mainly in the past few minutes, examine your documents. Maybe your test plans need to become more lean. Maybe your test cases might only be individual test summaries, test case titles or test objectives, and not step with validation points that there's a lot of waste there. So examine your documents. Testing is amplified learning, right? As a great cultural understanding for the team. Testing is good because we're learning about the application. Help build a quality culture with quality at every step. Quality from user stories, unit tests, code, environments, data, all those things we went through with unique quality at every step. And examine your automation strategy, not an automation strategy of more, and an automation strategy of lean and mean, right? Automate as much as makes sense, automate at the right level, like UI, API, unit level, with meaningful and fast results, right? Delivering automation with fast results. And remember, this surprises some people who don't do a lot of test automation, that maintenance kills. Maintenance is really the biggest cost. So automate as much as makes sense, knowing that maintenance kills. What are some first steps that you can do? Look for waste with your documents. Don't early document. Don't over document. Waiting, technical debt, the big dashboards, great places to look for waste. What you need is super efficient communication and collaboration, right? You may not need dashboards. You may need better collaboration. You may not need a lot of early documentation. You may need more efficient communication between you and the PO, maybe, right? So there's problems that may look like waste that can be solved by more efficient communication, more efficient collaboration. And hopefully I've given you a balanced idea of this idea of so many people being focused on waste with documentation, and the full fat milk all the way down to non-fat milk. Um, Lean doesn't mean stop. Just because it's written doesn't mean it's overhead, right? A certain amount of documentation can help us. All right. Documents and artifacts. I talked about this idea of documentation and lean. Remember, one great conversation I have with people talking about documentation is this idea of test cases and bugs in Scrum. What are test cases and bugs? Buy the book Scrum. Buy the book Scrum, meaning buy the book. Like what is it? What does the Scrum guide say about test cases and bugs? Nothing. Nothing. There's no test cases. There's no bugs. If you find an issue during development, that becomes an acceptance criteria. You add another acceptance criteria to the user story. And when you're testing, what are you testing? Acceptance criteria. You're testing that the system that you're building, that the function that you're building, it has this capability. It does this thing. Your tests are acceptance criteria. No sets of test cases in by the book Scrum. Also, bug reports. Uh, Scrum doesn't have bug reports. Scrum doesn't have bug database systems. Scrum has, if you get a bug that you're going to fix, right? It's a user story, becomes a user story, and it goes into the backlog. It gets prioritized with the other tasks. Imagine if you did that. Some companies do that. Imagine if you did that. If you don't do that, imagine if you did that in your company. You stopped having a bug tracking system, and issues that either customers find or bugs that happen once the product goes out become user stories. And that's it. There's no more bug database to manage. That should provide some really meaningful conversation among the team. So this idea about documents and what you keep and what's lean is complicated. And then that I said earlier about test plans. Predictable organizations don't write a big plan at the beginning and then everybody agrees on the plan and that's what's going to happen. Organizations learn. That doesn't mean don't write a test plan. It means your test plans ought to be lean and mean and just talk about the essential things. Test plans are really risk management documents to me. They can talk about some strategy stuff. There's always some things to talk about, who's doing what on a project, but they're not the big old style test plans, right? So it's not that test plans aren't useful. Test plans are useful. They just need to be lean and mean. Let me say one thing about test plans is, and I know this may be a unique uh, uh, conversation, but test plans have kind of gotten a bad name in software development. So people they kind of got rid of them, right? Everybody knows that test plans went away for a while, but test plans are back. And I get asked to help companies with test plans probably more than any other one topic because you work on a complicated product that has a lot of interfaces or it's a multi-faceted monster across a variety of Scrum teams, and gaps happen. I thought I was doing something. We didn't do that because we didn't have time because our sprint is only 2 weeks and we're only doing a couple of sprints before it goes out and we just didn't remember to test it. You don't write a test plan, gaps are going to happen. Problems are going to happen. But there was one organization that I was working with that they worked on a product, and this product had 5 Scrum teams. And these 5 Scrum teams for this product were located in 3 different countries. They were never at the same meeting at the same time. Even if they did a release planning meeting, which they kind of didn't do release plannings because they were all separate POs for each of these Scrum teams, even though they were all working on the same product. They were never in a place to discuss what was going to happen on the project. Plus, at the release planning meeting, they wouldn't have had really low-level details. So they had problems. Bugs were getting out, a lot of finger pointing, bad culture. It's your fault. You should have found it. we decided to write a test plan. And their test plan talked about risks. They talked about on every project we have to do this, we have to test it against this data, we have to test it against that. There was some strategy stuff, but the main piece in this test plan that was really lean, it was really skinny, was who's doing what. That team tests their features up to this, and then they have to test it on these couple of environments. This next team has to test the integration of that first one and this one, and they have to test it on these environments. And then the next team had to do, they were doing character sets. This other team was doing different languages. They were doing the upgrade. They just divided up the testing tasks between these 5 teams. All of the integration problems went away. All of the gaps went away just because they had this test plan that was really lean. It was just bullet points, but it talked about who's doing what. And they wrote this test plan. They wrote it once, and it lasted for 2 years. And then after 2 years, there were some major enough changes to the product that they updated it after 2 years. Plus, they changed what mobile devices they were supporting, which meant some things unique to that project. But they weren't writing a test plan very often. They wrote it once, and it lasted for 2 years, and it was a great help when new people came on the project, when different Scrum teams have some people roll on, some people roll off. That relearning and ramp-up time is a waste. So this really lean and mean document helped everybody get up to speed on, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what we have ahead of us, independent from looking at the UI and looking at the function and how the thing functioned. They had, here's what we're going to do to test it and roll it out. So just one example of how a document that was so far from what a traditional test plan used to look like really benefited a team in the long run. Okay, one more item that I want to bring up is this idea of measurement and dashboards. Some teams still do dashboards and they get lots of numbers and metrics and measurements and all this. Remember, Scrum has, you measure burn down tells you velocity. There you go, that's it. No dashboards, no bug counts, no bugs per clock, and no escape rates, and no big giant dashboards that companies used to do. You measure burn down. That's it. And Agile says working software is the primary measure of progress. So getting the software to actually work, that's the primary measurement. So if your team or your organization or your company does big dashboards, that's not lean. And I'm not telling you that you shouldn't do that. I'm saying that you're going to have to make some difficult choices here and get together and talk to the team about, if we want to be lean and we want to be more lean, how much, in this example, how much measurement are we really going to do? How much time are we going to devote? Even if a tool will pull out great dashboards and the whole thing is automated process, but then I have to build these dashboards and we get them and we're going to talk about them, and how much value does it really get you when modern development is not built on over measurement and dashboard? Think about Scrum and Agile, and there's not a lot of measurement there at all. So, looking for waste. Okay. And we've talked about just-in-time enough, and testing early, and deciding what you can test. Early in the project, you can decide what to test. Where and how you test it can be decided later, just in time. At the beginning of the project, we may say we have to test it this way, we have to test it against this data, we have to test it on this browser, we have to test it against this character set. These are the things we're going to test. But you don't have to write any details about it early. When do you write the details? Just in time. When do you write at what level we're going to test this, whether we're going to test it at the UI or the service level? You can write that just in time. You can make that decision, defer the decision, and decide that just in time. Okay, so I think I've talked about creating knowledge, and sometimes knowledge is documentation. I think we've hashed through the documentation bit enough. Being able to see the whole picture in Lean, balancing code production with testing. Right? You can't just write code and release it out into production. You have to test, and there's a balance there. And you may take what you might think is a productivity hit by spending more time testing. But if it's going to prevent support issues, if it's going to prevent doing a patch or a hotfix, then that's a giant savings. Fixing it now. Remember, Lean is about find the bug early, fix it now, find bugs early, no technical debt, quality at every step. Lean has a very big component of it that is about testing. It's not only about continuous delivery, continuous deployment, jam production code out to users and let them tell us if there's a problem. That's not what Lean's about, because the cost of fixing, the cost of going back and fixing something in the release that we could have found that bug and fixed it if we tested earlier, the cost of fixing it after customers find it is going to be way higher. Could be as simple as having to go back to the start, and that cost of having to start it over again, it could be a reputation cost. It could be a hit to your, why do we use this product anyway? I don't like it. So there's a balance between getting stuff to production, but also testing. And we have to balance those things out. We don't only release for the sake of speed. We deliver high quality customer value. Testing has to be balanced with MVP, with minimum releasable functionality, in that conversation about MVP, minimum viable product. There's a balance with testing there, right? We don't just do the minimum amount of development and send it out to production. We have to test it. So where the rubber really hits the road, think about how fast it takes you to run your automation. And if it's slow, fix it. Do you have zero technical debt, or does your team accumulate a lot of technical debt? Do you have a lot of rework? That means that the process is broken. And how great is your communication? Lean is really reliant on great communication, great collaboration, not just good or adequate. Plus early testing at all levels. Early testing not only at the unit level, but as soon as you can test something at other levels, test it, find bugs early. And remember that quality starts with user stories. You need great user stories. So you're going to want to wind up with a good product. You need great user stories. So you know the Lean principles. I hope that this was beneficial, that you learned a bunch here. Have some contact information for you here. Learn more about LogicGear. Go check out some of the things we have. Thank you for joining us. We have a whole bunch of information and content on continuous testing. We do continuous testing. We build automation suites for people. And go check out LogicGear Magazine, which I'm the editor of LogicGear Magazine. It has a lot of really useful stuff. And thank you for staying today. I hope you found it beneficial. See you again.
Thank you for attending our webinar. As a reminder, we will be sending out a recorded version of this webinar within 48 hours. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.